And welcome once more to Flashpoints. I'm Bob Orr. Joining me, Juan Zarate, our national security analyst. Juan, good to see you as always.
Bob, great seeing you.
So the center of a lot of news has been the Arabian Peninsula. We had the apparent throw out of the government in Yemen, and then followed quickly by the death of the king in Saudi Arabia.
Yeah. I mean, you and I have talked about this, Bob. In some ways, you couldn't make up a more tumultuous scenario. Oil prices at half their value, the Saudi king dying and questions of succession, and Sana'a falling to the Houthi rebels and America's ally, President Hadi, falling by the wayside at a moment of crisis and threats from terrorism. So you, in some ways, couldn't...
So what does all that mean?
What does it all mean? It means this. One, the Saudis were very clear that they wanted to demonstrate clarity of succession and continuity. And so they have now King Salman taking the helm after King Abdullah's death. Crown Prince Mukran, an understandable, known figure, taking the role of Crown Prince. And interestingly, and I think most importantly for viewers to understand, the Deputy Crown Prince, the next in line, if you will, is Mohammed bin Nayef, who comes from the next generation of princes. It's the first attempt to, in some ways, signal what the succession to the next generation
and a real
will look
friend
like.
to the United States.
A real friend of the United States. I've met with him several times, a key counterterrorism player. I wrote about him in my book, a subject of assassination attempts by al-Qaeda itself, because he is so important. He's 55 years old. And so what the Saudis wanted to do amid the death of King Abdullah was to very quickly signal that there's going to be immediate continuity, and we also have continuity moving forward.
Kind of a look at the future.
Exactly.
So here's where we're going generationally.
Exactly, and especially when they're facing pressure from Yemen, all this tumult from the south, and pressure from Iran, which has its proxies working in and around Saudi Arabia. It's very important for the Saudis to demonstrate that stability, and I think important for the president to make his visit along with a bipartisan delegation to Riyadh to demonstrate U.S. support for that continuity.
So while the kingdom apparently is relatively stable, despite the oil price collapse,
Yep.
Yemen is not. So tell me about the Houthi rebels and what this means now that the government there has fallen in terms of U.S. counterterrorism concerns.
Yeah, the government had been fighting the Houthi rebels, largely coming from the north, for a number of years. And the Houthi rebels are a branch of Shia Islam, alleged to be supported by the Iranians. I think there's good evidence to that effect, supplied by
and enemies of al-Qaeda.
Enemies of al-Qaeda as well. And keep in mind, you have that divide. The Houthis had gained momentum and strength and had taken the capital of Sana'a and have, in essence, toppled the current government. The current government, friendly to the United States, President Hadi had supported U.S. counterterrorism efforts against al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, the most dangerous of the al-Qaeda affiliates. And so there's real questions now, though, as to what happens with U.S. policy, because in many ways, the U.S. doesn't want to be cooperating directly with the Houthis. At the same time, it needs to continue its assault on al-Qaeda operatives and figures, and we've seen some strikes even just in the last 24 hours to that effect.
Is it possible that the U.S. could have a governing relationship with the Houthis? Is that even a possibility?
I think this is the same question you had with Iran and dealing with ISIS, because we have a common enemy in al-Qaeda or ISIS, but I don't think the U.S. will develop an overt alliance with the Houthis to go after al-Qaeda. There may be an understanding as to how we may work in parallel to fight al-Qaeda elements, but I don't think you're going to have the U.S. overtly have an alliance. The reason that is the U.S. doesn't want to signal that we are in some ways working with Iranian proxies at a time of great suspicion and tumult, as we've talked about, especially with our Sunni Arab allies, the Saudis, the Emiratis, the Omanis, the Egyptians. That would send a very odd and weird signal, especially as we're negotiating with Iran around the nuclear program. So I imagine some accommodation, some understandings, but you're not going to see an overt alliance in Sana'a.
Or can the U.S. just act with impunity without permission? I mean, essentially, we saw the drone strike yesterday.
I think the president has signaled that. We're going to act unilaterally if we need to, and he's signaled in his press conferences recently that our counterterrorism posture hasn't changed. It has to in some ways because you don't have the governing sort of backing to what the U.S. may want to do, and certainly some of the intelligence resources may not be there. But the reality is if the U.S. sees a threat coming from Yemen, it's not going to wait for permission from the Houthis to act.
Trouble on all parts of the peninsula.
You got to watch it.
Okay, Juan, thanks as
Thank
always.
you, Bob.
And thanks to you for watching Flashpoints. I'm Bob Orr. We'll see you next time.